take one. Hopefully it's the only one.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the podcast. I am Mark Alessi. You're joining us, the Business Incubator Association of New York State, with our BIANYS member highlight. Today, I am joined by one of the most popular incubator managers I have ever met. He is well respected in the field, not only across New York State, but the US and internationally. I've traveled internationally for BIANYS, and people the world over realize that the first incubator in the world was started here in New York by the Mancuso family. And it is the Batavia Industrial Center, or the Harvester. I am joined here today by Tom Mancuso, who has taken the experience of starting that first incubator, or running that first incubator, and has grown it to launch a number of incubators in a number of cities across upstate New York, and has consulted with many municipalities, again, I believe internationally and definitely throughout the US, on how to utilize incubation as a means to turn around your local economy, or at least diversify your local economy. So Tom, thank you for joining us here today.
And thank you, Mark. Thanks for the kind words. And, I would like to take a moment to thank you and Aaron, for all you guys do for our organization. It's an important job, and you take great care of us, and we're very grateful for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I know the listeners are going to want to hear a bit of the history of how the concept of an incubator was birthed and incubated. And then, from that experience, how you ended up going out and doing what you're doing now in so many other communities.
Yeah, it's a much longer story than y'all want to hear, but we'll try to condense it and hit some highlights, and leave some time for Q&A. Of course, the Mancuso Business Development Group is celebrating 61 years of helping people and communities prosper by adaptively reusing big old buildings as places to attract, start, and grow businesses that'll create jobs for their local economies. It's a work that grew out of that foundational event you spoke about. My father creating the first business incubator in Batavia as a private sector response, as an effort to replace thousands of lost factory jobs. It's a thing that has obviously gone on to have a global impact, as evidenced by the picture here of a bronze bust of my father at the Anshan Tech Incubator in China. He was always particularly proud of that. Never got to see it in his lifetime. I hope I get to do that. But it does speak to the impact of what seemed like a practical, common sense, locally based approach. Today, we do a bunch of stuff, and while you could sum it all up, by saying, we figure things out, and we find ways to fund things, and then we fill them. More specifically, a list of projects or services we provide are here. And I should maybe start by saying that most of the work we do, 98% of the work we do, is really for other people. And we talk about project sponsors, and they can come in lots of shapes and sizes, but are very often nonprofit, economic development or community development organizations, communities, IDAs, LDCs. Sometimes they're corporate property owners right-sizing their real estate. Sometimes they're just benevolent local investors. And we'll talk about some of those as I go through projects we've addressed in the past. Very common things we do are opportunity assessments. You know, is there an opportunity in a building in your community? Is there an opportunity in your community for a building? You know, looking at the resources, the timing, and a number of things. We can set up and operate community business centers. That's really a job-focused incubator, and to me, all incubators are job-focused or community business centers. But there's become enough confusion about the terminology when you say incubator that we find ourselves often talking about community business center or local business center, just to clarify that this is very place-based, job-generating kind of a focus. Project and performance consulting, you know, is your project doing all it can do with the resources available to it? Or is there some low-hanging fruit, other resources you could put to use, other ways you could use the resources you already have at your disposal? So we try to provide another set of eyes. So, you know, again, these are just examples of the sorts of things we can do. We really like to help people find ways to do things that will help their local economy move forward. And that really all grows out of, you know, the genesis of our organization, which really started in a way back in the 1800s when my great-grandfather and grandfather immigrated from Sicily to New Orleans. But then in the early 1900s, they came to Batavia to work as laborers to help build an expansion of the Massey Harris plant, which was Batavia's largest employer. They went on to work there and then start a plumbing business and got involved in a number of businesses, so that by the 1950s, when the factory closed, they were in a position to look at this economic development disaster and realize it for what it was. And, you know, rather than wait for somebody to help out, they said, well, they thought maybe they should do something about this, you know, to help the community and help their many businesses. And so their idea was to buy the 1 million square foot plant and of course, they thought it was find a way to get another big business in. So big business out, big business in. It didn't really go that way. So they bought the plant and took my dad out of the hardware store where he was the manager, a recently returned veteran of World War II. And they gave him this job: fill the buildings, create jobs, and make money while you're doing it. And actually, 61 years later, you could sum up everything we do in those words. They just take different shapes and sizes because of the unique situations we encounter. Well, it didn't take him long to figure out he wasn't going to get one big business. And so, you know, he set off on this path to do whatever he could to help anybody locate, start, grow their business in Batavia at what was then called the Batavia Industrial Center. And he created a sec to do it, you know, which is really evidenced by the first tenant, who was a 1,200 square foot sign maker who didn't have any money. And so they traded rent for a sign. And so they were his first customer, and he built the sign, which still hangs over the front door. And of course, it was originally the Batavia Industrial Center because our focus was replacing lost factory jobs with factory jobs, very much manufacturing for manufacturing. And I would tell you today, that's always our primary starting point. We're very focused on makers, artists, artisans, makers, manufacturers of all shapes and sizes. It's just the reality of the economy, the evolution of the economy, that's about a third of the opportunity that's available. It's more or less depending on your community. And so the Batavia Industrial Center evolved into the Harvester Center, which is now home to 80 plus enterprises. They range from 300 square feet to 70,000 square feet. About a third of them are manufacturers. The rest run the gamut from tech to service to health services to food to retail, entertainment. There's a private local theater in there, recording studios. I mean, if it can happen, if it can be a business, it is happening or has happened at the Harvester Center. And again, over time, we've had folks grow to 100,000 square feet, 200,000 square feet, and then move out into the community. It's the nice thing about big buildings, there's always room for people to grow. And the graduates, it should not be missed that the people who have moved out of the Harvester Center and built or bought or leased buildings in the region, in the county, represent more than $25 million worth of assessed valuation in the community. So, of course, as you know, and a lot of our audience will know, incubators aren't just about the folks that are in the building. They're about, the process, the growing and the moving out into the community.
I often hear, incubation, it's very hard to make money in incubation as an incubator manager. And sometimes it's even, it can operate as a loss sometimes. However, it's an investment in the community that, is often done because the graduates, if you take a look at for every dollar of incubator money, there's $8 of local investment that flourishes from that dollar of incubation money.
And I think you're right, Mark. I think that's well said. And I believe, and in our experience, a lot of communities look at it that way. One of the challenges is, as all incubator managers know, is that it is expensive, to run a program, because real estate's just about real estate. Incubators are about programs, about networking events, resource connections, helping the entrepreneurs be successful, putting them in touch with the right finance and the right mentors, and there's cost to all that. It's a very high touch, intimate management process, and it is a challenge. It is one of the reasons, and I'll talk about it off and on. It's one of the reasons we tend to lean towards bigger projects, because our experience has been, as excited as everybody is at the beginning, and it's easier to get funding at the beginning of a project, by the third to fifth year, funders often get, funder fatigue. And, so we always think it's very important, and we, again, try to steer our projects to being self-sustaining from an operational point of view by that third to fifth year. And again, that varies based on the sponsor and the situation. I guess I'm just reiterating your point that the communities rightly see it as an investment in their future and in their economy, because the folks who come out of here, or these kinds of facilities, are the folks who then buy buildings and pay taxes and buy things and generate sales tax, and that's what keeps our communities going. Well, our success filling that 1 million square feet in a small town, led to people asking us to do similar things. And that's really where the Mancuso Business Development Group came from, was the request to recreate this process in other communities and other buildings. People don't always realize.
For a second, because I definitely want to hear about these. I have one other question.
Yes,
on
sir.
On the Harvester. I know it's the first incubator at 1 million square feet. That is enormous. Is it the biggest incubator in the world?
I'm going to say not, only because they count the Brooklyn Navy Yard as an incubator. Brooklyn Navy Yard, I think, is 2 million square feet or 2.5 million square feet, which is just mind-boggling. Although they have a little bigger market to draw from than Batavia, New York.
It's that, and I'd have to say, having been to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, I feel like it's an assortment of different incubators, but having it under one roof, I think it might be one of the largest independent, or the largest independent incubator I've ever heard of. So now I'll do a little bit of research on that. And we'll do
Well, I would be interested to hear what you learn.
yeah. So sorry, please proceed on where you've taken it since the harvester.
No, but it is an interesting point, because what happens a lot of times in small communities is you get these oversized buildings in these undersized markets. And if you don't find a way to do something with them, they just become blighted drags and ghosts. And it's a very negative situation. And I'll talk about this a little more at the end when we're looking at a project we're involved with in Buffalo. But that's very much the puzzle sometimes, is how do you reuse this big, large building in this small market? Or how do you use this big building that was built for something else in a positive way today? So over the years, we've been able to work a number of places, and we've worked with thousands of businesses, managed millions of square feet of space, which has created countless jobs in a diverse selection of communities and situations and sponsors. And my dad used to like to tell clients that it was important to hire us because we significantly improved their opportunity for success, because we'd already made so many mistakes. And it's that collection of mistakes and experience is really what comes together to inform our strategic building solution, which is the way we tackle these things, and the way we would recommend anybody. I suspect most people tackle things this way. We sit down with the sponsors to establish what the objective vision is. What are the measurable wins they hope to get out of this undertaking? We then do an opportunity analysis to identify what the real resources are: people, money, geography, economic timing, any number of things. What are the resources available for that situation, that sponsor, that objective vision? And we create a plan to weave all that into a path that we think will be successful. And then we work to protect that progress by measuring it, measuring our performance, comparing it back to the objective vision, and evolving as is appropriate as time changes, as the project changes, and they all do. But it's very much, again, based on this effort to achieve your objectives with your available resources, so that you can control your fate as much as possible. Some more recent examples of work we've done. This is kind of a spectrum here by itself. The upper left-hand corner is a 16,000 square foot pre-Civil War manufacturing building in Rochester that was converted to offices. Well, this was a project that was actually done when we got involved. We were working for a small group of private investors. They're very community oriented, and this building was only 25% occupied, or 70%, 75% vacant, depending on if you're a pessimist or an optimist. And we changed the we went in there and provided some services, restructured the front end of the building, created a very flexible, entrepreneurial focused leasing program, introduced networking events and entrepreneurial education. And in 15 months, 12 to 15 months, we were at 90% occupancy. So, it filled up pretty fast.
What was the entrepreneurial leasing program? What does that look like? Is it like for equity or?
Well, the easiest way I can summarize it, generally commercial real estate, they want the highest rent for the longest period of time, providing the least assistance to the tenants. It's just managing costs for the landlord.
Right.
So in an entrepreneurial leasing program, and it'll vary depending on the sponsor and the building and a lot of things, but generally speaking, you look at who your high priority targets are. Are they manufacturers? Are they job creators? Are they life science? Are they, what are they? And then when those people show up, you're very aggressive in helping them get started. I mean, one of the very useful components, we believe, of what incubators do is to, in effect, backdoor finance a lot of these startups, because the money they don't have to pay us in rent, they can put into investment in their process, investment in their employees.
Right.
And that was not a thing that had existed at this particular facility. Now, I would point out, and again, every building's a little different, but I mean, this was actually a building that ended up at above market rents when the tenant stabilized, but they could start for no rent or 10% rent or 20% rent. And then it was scheduled up based on their business plan, based on their job creation, based on their alignment with the sponsor's objective vision. I'd contrast that a little bit to the next building on the right, which is a 500,000 square foot former General Motors manufacturing plant in Lockport, New York. It's called Harrison Place. This was a place when we got there, they were losing 6 digits a year. It was owned by the city. We actually wanted to tear it down, but they couldn't get the money. They couldn't get the grant money to tear it down. When we got there, there were effectively no businesses and no jobs. And, we bootstrapped it back we were able to demonstrate how for less money than it would have cost to demo it, we thought we could get it to break even, which we did. It took 4 years. But, we went from 0 jobs to over 100 jobs, just blocking and tackling ones and twos, entrepreneurial development. But this was a building that was much more focused on manufacturing. To this day, it has the highest percentage manufacturing content of any of the projects we manage. Subsequent to achieving our first 100, we then were able to attract a high-tech manufacturer who brought more than 100 jobs all in one fell swoop. So today there's 250, 260 plus people working in this building, in this campus. There's actually 4 buildings on the campus. And we've come so far, from the scary building that nobody would rent space in to there's a developer who's moving through the steps to buy one of the buildings, a 200,000 foot building, and do a $25 to $30 million adaptive reuse, mixed use project. So residential, work, live, just a transformational project. This is a building that lays between the downtown and a very disadvantaged, struggling lower SES kind of an area. Right. And so the addition of this kind of housing and these kinds of jobs are just going to change that part of town.
I'm kicking myself because I was in Lockport in August. I took my kids on the canal cruise to actually look at the locks, and I should have been organized enough to reach out to you and take a look at this facility, the Harrison Place, because I've heard so much about it. So,
well, as you've said, there's so many incubators in the state. It's hard to keep track of all of them, Mark.
Right, that's right. But next time I'm in the area, I definitely want to see this project.
Yeah, no, it's been a great project, and it's one of the nice things. Everybody wants a silver bullet, and that is one of the things about incubators, particularly community business centers, adaptive reuse projects. They're 3 to 5 years to stabilization. These are long-term things. We've been involved at Harrison Place for 13 years now. We've been at facilities for 10 and 20 years. I mean, it takes a while to build up your credibility. And when you're bootstrapping things, it takes a long time to, earn the money to do the next thing.
Right.
But I mean, that's the way a lot of these small communities have to do it. But again, a bit of wisdom my dad used to like to share. Economic development's a forever thing because every business is in some stage of leaving your community. From the day they open their door, immediately they're in some stage of leaving. They're going to fail, they're going to sell, they're going to grow and relocate. I mean, any number of things is going to happen. And that's why you have to forever be growing these businesses. You have to have places for startups. You have to have places for second steps. You have to have places for mature people. You need to have industrial parks. You need to address their needs throughout the life cycle of every business. That's what keeps communities strong. And Lockport's had a particularly strong, consistent vision of their community. And I think it plays out in Harrison Place and the success that's happened there. Again, just more examples. The bottom example is a former electronics manufacturing building, corporate owner selling it. We had a corporate company, local manufacturer who's coming out of an old 200,000 foot building. They were going to build a 200,000 foot building. We sold them this 700,000 foot building based on the principle, A, it wasn't going to cost them much more than building a building. But it's like that starter home, where you buy the double and the tenant pays your mortgage.
Right.
We managed the other side. The manufacturer took their side. And I would point out, by the way, they were going to build a 200,000 foot building. They immediately moved into 350,000 square feet. Not sure what they would have done had they built one.
Right.
But it's just an example, again, different sponsors, different communities, different objectives, different strategic blueprints. A common thread, though, through all that we do are these core priorities of jobs. We're very focused on creating jobs. They're place-based programs. Every place is different. The resources are different. The objectives are different. The local DNA is different. What works great in Lockport doesn't really work in Geneva. Downtown Rochester is different than downtown Buffalo. You got to build the program to the place that you are and the sponsor who's writing the checks. And of course, we're very focused on being financially independent in a 3 to 5 year window. It's great to be able to get assistance. It's even better when you don't have to depend on it. It's just a different scenario. And as we spoke earlier, I think this financially independent piece is really an important thing for everybody, even university-based and other programs which have been well-funded as they should be always. I just think people are really going to be challenged by the scarce federal and state resources, in these difficult times for the next 3 to 5 years.
Right. Well, to that end, are most of the sponsors that you've dealt with, are they municipal, or I know you said there was a private investor group for the project in Rochester. Do you see public-private partnerships? Do you see more public funding, more private funding, or is it just really, there is no norm? It's
No,
just...
I think it's safe to say, Mark, that again, we have a propensity to favor job-focused projects, and when you talk about that segment, 80+% of the sponsors are going to be a community organization, an IDA, an LDC, some, a foundation. I mean, some locally based nonprofit. Because as you said earlier, and it's well said, it's nobody opens an incubator, especially a job-based or community-based incubator. Nobody opens those to make money. I mean, they're an investment in your community. So the nonprofit status is really important both to attract capital for the first bucket of startup, acquisition and startup of a program. But it's also important to manage your operating costs to leave you the room to deliver the program. Because if there's no program, my good friend David Hockman used to say all the time, if there's no program, it's just real estate.
That's right.
The jobs really come from the program, and the mission focused management of the real estate. So, one of the things we're, not a deep dive, but a deeper dive. I mean, this is a thing that's a fascinating project we're involved with right now. We're 5 years into the Northland Beltline redevelopment in Buffalo, New York. So the Buffalo Urban Development Corp, so again, a nonprofit associated with the city. So in response to Mayor Brown's vision and Governor Cuomo's economic support, they focused on this very blighted, disadvantaged east side of Buffalo. To those who are familiar with Buffalo, this is an area just south of ECMC, bordered by Grider on the east and Fillmore on the west, the Beltline Railroad on the south, and bisected by Northland Avenue. And so what they did was, in this area, which an important local broker calls the land that time forgot, they acquired 5 empty, blighted manufacturing facilities that totaled 700,000 square feet and 35 acres of land. And you see, the span of that in this image. You get to see where it is in the city, but you get to see, this is really a very spread out undertaking. And there's lots of resources that were targeted here. I mean, new streetscapes, building investment. The focus, the vision was to create an urban opportunity park that would work from startups, neighborhood startups, all the way to multinational companies that would be anchored by a training center that would train people to work in these places. And that ended up leading to the creation of the Northland Workforce Training Center, which they've taught me for shorthand to say is like a vocational community college. And they work together with educational institutions like ECC, Erie Community College, Buff State, Alfred University, Alfred State, to deliver a variety of programs that include things like welding and electrical, robotics, and so forth. So I don't have all the horrible pictures of what this looked like at the beginning, and you wouldn't want to see them anyway. But we've all seen these kinds of parts of town.
Sure.
Well, this is Northland Central, 683 Northland is the sort of the centerpiece of the project. It was 237,000 square foot building. It's anchored by the Workforce Training Center, which is about 80,000 square feet. Again, this was a blighted, leaky mess of a building. And I can't help joking about the artist rendering in the lower left-hand corner because, we've all seen artist rendering and never seen anything in the real world that looked like it.
Right.
But the top right-hand picture is from this winter at 683 Northland. It really looks very much like the artist rendering.
Actually more attractive than the artist rendering.
Yeah, it's really, and I wish I had more inside pictures. It's just an amazing project. But that 237,000 square foot building is now 96% occupied. The training center takes 80,000 square feet at the front, a couple of floors of the office building. There's a minority construction company who's actually involved in some of the early work. It takes the third floor. the fourth floor of the office building and the large crane bay at the back, what we call Building 81, is just being fitted out for a high-tech manufacturer who's relocating from California. And then there's a UB startup, Spark Charge, who makes, they call them spare tires for electric vehicles. It's a battery that you carry in your electric vehicle. So if you run out of electricity, you just plug it into this little suitcase and off you go.
I saw them present at a Fuse Hub Challenge about 2-3 years ago, and been hearing about them ever since. They're, everybody has a lot of high hopes for that company. I didn't realize they were located here. That's fantastic.
Well, and it's a great example of university-based innovation. I mean, this was University of Buffalo, the 42 North, their funding effort. I mean, it was really a combination of things. And a lot of these guys are actually from Massachusetts, and yet they've located the business here in Buffalo. So, I mean, it's only one part of, I mean, it's less than a third of the whole campus, but it is rightly called Northland Central, and it's just transformational to this neighborhood. When I think about what I saw there 5 years ago when I started, I could tell you stories, but I won't, because it's much better. And I would say, and I think it's an important thing because it speaks well to the people in the neighborhood. We had a consultant come through the project very early on, 4.5 years ago. And when they were talking about the investment that was going to go on here, they said they were from a big city. And they said, well, you're going to put up chain link fences with razor wire, and you're going to have armed guards. And the folks from Buffalo Urban Development Corp were aghast. They said, absolutely not. I mean, this is a community project. We're going to welcome the community. The community needs to be involved with this. And that has been the way it's gone. And the folks really have embraced it, and they look after it. And it's a very positive development in the community, in the neighborhood. I mean, this is just one of the buildings, Building 64, leaky disaster of a building on the left. Pristine manufacturing space now occupied by Buffalo Manufacturing Works, which is, they help manufacturers improve their process, try out new technologies. Very exciting group.
But I've seen them in downtown Buffalo Manufacturing Works. Did they relocate there, or they have?
They did. Their office, just as you say, was downtown, and they moved last year out to Northland because they couldn't have this kind of space. They couldn't have a manufacturing bay and, climate control, cranes. This really significantly increased their capacity to serve their mission, serve their customers. This was just this was a building, this was part of a 330,000 square foot building. They tore down the middle of it because it's a super fund remediation effort. We saved some buildings at the street faces. So this is on Northland. We saved a couple of buildings at the East Elvin end. This was actually supposed to be my office. But you see the before on the left, the after on the right. It's a 26,000 square foot piece of building, but it's fully occupied. As we got into the renovation, Albright Knox Art Gallery is doing a renovation of their center, and they needed a satellite location. So they took 15,000 square feet, including my office. And, that's now their special events display area. It's their educational program area. And then the back of the building, the other 9,000 square feet is occupied by a couple of minority contractors. So, there's a lot of things that are going on in Northland, but it's a great example of different things. The capital stack for Northland Central is just insane in the sense that it has so many parts because it needed to be. There's money from ESD, from NIPA, from Niagara, from National Grid. There's historic tax credits, there's new market tax credits. You name it, it's put to work there. And that's the way some of these projects come together. This particular project, the 612 Northland, is mostly, I think, a Restore New York project, Restore New York 5, I think. And so again, just reinforces that every project, every situation is different. Even with a big project, different phases of the project are different.
Right.
So that's the thing we're working on. You know, you had asked, you know, what do we see going forward? Well, we're always, of course, looking for that next opportunity to help people with a building, with a community, with a project. We're also taking advantage of all the new tech tools that are becoming available to try to enable our ability to expand the geography of our outreach, and also to be able to reach down and work more effectively with smaller buildings in smaller markets. Because there was a consultant at one of the NBIA conferences back when it was NBIA, and it was maybe back in the 70s or 80s, and I wrote it down, and it's actually on my desk right now. It's he said, if a community is large enough to have a library, they should have a business incubator. And I thought there was a lot of wisdom in that. You know, it's really, every community needs that place where people know they can go to get help to start and grow their business. Right. And it's more help than just handing out pamphlets. And I'm not picking on anybody, but I mean, they need a place, they need an office, they need a truck dock, they need a place where they can share and interact with other entrepreneurs. It's just in a small market, it's going to be a smaller one. And in a big market, it can be a bigger one. You can do more because you have more market, more deal flow, more velocity in a bigger place. But I just say, I've always remembered that, and that's a goal of ours for more small communities to have access to business incubator capacity.
I think it's obviously, I would agree that that's extremely important. And, you know, as an entrepreneur myself, there have been a myriad of organizations that had offered help to my startup company. And the most valuable that I was able to find is when you know, the incubator, but when you're working with a staff person who's actually taken risks themselves and started businesses and started, organizations, even like an incubator. And like you said, there is a certain level of experience that comes from mistakes. In fact, in the Silicon Valley, many VCs won't invest in an entrepreneur until they've had at least one failure, because you learn more in as your company falls apart as you do when it's first being brought together, and that level of experience is important. So incubator managers, they've seen it all. They've watched companies that did not succeed and were able to assess after seeing that why. And I'm blown away when I first started getting involved with this, and my first entree into the innovation ecosystem before I started my company was to run an angel network. And I called everybody I could potentially get on the phone when I was taking that job, because I really wanted to understand this entire ecosystem. And this one incubator manager from the Hudson Valley gets on with a little bit of an attitude. And he's like, I don't know why I need to talk to you, but my boss said I did. And what do you want to know? And I was like, well, I'm trying to learn as much as I can about the innovation ecosystem. And he's like, this is all you need to know. You're going to see 50 business plans. You're going to see a bunch of pitches. By the 50th or 100th one, you're going to know within a few minutes of whether or not that company has got a shot or not. And I was actually insulted as an emerging entrepreneur myself that somebody can so quickly make an assessment. Well, by the 50th business plan that I had to vet for the Angel Network, I started seeing patterns and I knew what the angels were interested in, and I knew when the questions that, the answers to certain questions were wishy-washy or fishy. You just started, you started getting an experience level, and, you know, the incubator managers, I think there's a sense of, even though there's a certain level of diversity of businesses, of issues with those businesses, the problems those businesses are solving, most of the obstacles they encounter are movies we've seen before, and can give advice on how to get out of, or how to get through the issue. And that's the value of an incubator, as opposed to, other avenues that entrepreneurs, seek for help with their business. The incubator manager is invaluable.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and that ability, as you say, first of all, the incubator manager's seen it, and he or she can share that experience. But by definition of their position, they have an interest in helping you. I mean, they're not there in a position of self-interest. They're there in a position of your interest, and
Right.
and they're going to say, well, here's a resource, or here's a mentor, or here's a program. I mean, here's things I can point you at that will help. I would share a thing that we hear often from our tenants. Is that, especially a lot of the smaller ones, they say, look, I could do this from home. I could do my home office, or I could work out of my garage or my barn. One of the things I really value is not being alone, knowing there's somebody I can go talk to, who will steer me, in the right direction. But also interaction with other entrepreneurs. And it's another reason we like having a diverse population, because sometimes the younger ones benefit from talking to the more mature ones. And just as you said, and a lot of people miss that, it doesn't matter that they're not all tech, or they're not all manufacturing, or they're not all service. I mean, a lot of business issues are business issues. I mean, you got to sell, you got to take in more money than you pay out. You got to keep track of your performance and your key statistics. It's really a lot of fun watching them work through that themselves. It's one of the reasons we focus so much on networking events. Which is one of the challenges COVID has dealt us. Is we're very get people together. Spontaneous collisions, creative collisions. Have coffee, have a cookie, talk about business. It's been a challenge to keep that going for folks, and they really need it right now.
Agreed. With COVID, I think everyone is assessing what's next and all the different models. And I know a lot of our incubators are doing a lot of virtual programming now, but people are wondering how much of that is long-term. And, I don't think you can replace indefinitely the importance of in-person human interaction. Even, whether it's business mentorship or it's doing business. We've adapted, we're doing okay, but, I believe that people will be a bit more efficient in terms of the way they do their business, and how many meetings they set up. But, I know a lot of us can't wait to, get back to our offices and that more natural interaction. And I agree with you. I've seen a benefit. So my company is located at an incubator, and the benefit of being able to walk into the shared kitchen and bump into another CEO and share, what we're doing that week and what our concerns are. And sometimes they have the same concerns, or again, they've seen that movie before just a few months ago, and they can point you in the right direction of who to call and where to get the help that you need. So definitely important. But from a COVID-19 perspective, what do you think incubators can be doing? We're seeing, in our membership, a enormous amount of applications from non-traditional entrepreneurs that, a lot of folks in our membership have not had the diverse pool of companies in their incubators like you might have experienced and have explained. So from those lessons learned, a lot of our incubator managers that have been just high tech feel in this crisis, they want to do more for folks in the community that typically wouldn't go to an incubator, but are forced into entrepreneurship out of necessity. What can we be doing for them?
Well, it's funny that you say that. I mean, I go back to a very early slide. That's one of the reasons we have started to talk about community business centers versus business incubators, because often those, what the incubator industry would call non-traditional, as in not high innovation, not venture capital driven entrepreneurs. They think that's all incubators are about. It's all writing code and, neuroscience and bioscience. We have actually seen that uptick in activity. And again, we kid that the business incubator business is a little bit like stockbrokers. When things are good, you see a lot of people because people are optimistic, and when things are bad, you see a lot of people because people are desperate or because things are bad.
Okay.
Yeah, we're definitely in that world right now, and we're seeing online retail, hairdressers, barbershops. We have a new coffee shop at the Harvester. Again, we probably see more makers, wood, metal kind of folks, because that's our reputation, and we do lean towards that. But we've seen services, professional services, more of that, and so again, we're geared that way because we're community business centers. We're place-based job creators, and so we think all jobs are important. So we think all businesses are important. It's some of the things we're doing in the face of that. We're being even more aggressive about free rent, low rent, graduated rents, shorter term deals for people. It seems a little counterintuitive, but when you're an entrepreneur taking a chance, looking at that 3-year deal is kind of that ups the risk bar. We'll do month to month, 6 months. We'll rent people's space by the day.
Right.
It's trying to be more flexible and creative. Again, we have big buildings, so we have the space to do that. We have the kinds of space. If you just have office space, you generally don't have loading docks, and that's going to, limit you to a lot of the stuff that's being done remotely, being done at home. Of course, nobody's going to the coffee shop anymore. I definitely feel like we all need to be more creative, more flexible. Communities need to have a way to help those contractors who want to start a business, those people who have a new way to make something, additive manufacturers, 3D printers, they need different stuff than woodworkers. This need for more bandwidth, different kinds of power, clean space, climate control space. We've seen several evolutions here at the Harvester Center in Batavia. We feel like we're on our 7th iteration of space, and I went from bigger industrial space to smaller industrial space to smaller mixed-use space, but now it's really sort of turning up to a little more higher value space. It used to be just about cheap, now it's about, again, once they've stabilized their business, but some of these businesses, they need the bandwidth, they need the air conditioning, they need better appearing space. There's this whole spectrum of need, but the ability to be more flexible, because you said it very correctly, Mark. The diversity of need is greater than it's ever been. And we're going to have to figure out a way to rise to that.
Right. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time. I always feel like when we speak, I'm only scratching the surface of what I could learn from you. And I'm sure those watching and listening are feeling the same way. Look forward to getting back to Western New York and seeing some of these projects firsthand. And, you know, hopefully this is the first of many conversations.
Well, you're always welcome. Anytime you're driving by, swing
Thank
in.
you.
So glad to see you. And thanks again for all you do. We're so blessed to have you and Aaron leading the way for us at BIANYS.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, take care, Tom.
Thank you. You too, Mark. Bye now.